Thank you everyone for joining me today. I would like to have a discussion with you on how to start a career in cybersecurity by way of either cybersecurity auditing or becoming a cybersecurity consultant. Um, the reason why I am here speaking on these two topics is in the last 2 years, these are two very prominent roles that I have been a part of, but it's it's more of a discussion of it wasn't how I got into the industry, which can be kind of more of a progressional talk. So I wanted to take the time to share with all of you kind of how I did it, what it takes, what it looks like, what the industry leaders are looking for, and what you can do to set yourself apart from everybody else that's out there trying to break into the industry or even get into a more challenging role like a cybersecurity auditor or a security consultant. Whichever way you go, I don't necessarily think there is a wrong choice. So again, thank you for joining me, and we are going to just get started. So right, just kind of covered it, but there are so many jobs. There's so many jobs in the IT and cybersecurity industry. So for me, it just came down to a question of what am I passionate about, right? Do I want to be an analyst? Do I want to be an auditor? Do I want to just be a consultant on the side and just answer the hard questions that, managers or directors or VPs or anybody at the higher level might have, becoming that go-to person that has those answers and be that facilitator of the conversation? Or do I want to be a system administrator, right? Those are all very valid questions that anybody, it doesn't matter what stage you are in your career, right? You always want to be asking yourself, because the last thing you want to do is get stuck in a job that you're not passionate about and that at the end of the day, you are just exhausted and it's not fulfilling you. So for me, I always loved compliance. I loved security, just a natural pull towards it, but I loved the simplicity of it, the way it took the intricacies of a network and it said, okay, this is how you make it safe. This is how you make it secure. The more I learned, the more I realized that, hey, there's a whole job behind this. And that's what a cybersecurity auditor is. And then there's different roles on those teams, right? But that's a little later on in the conversation. And another great, position that I've had the privilege of holding is becoming a security consultant. I am one of the go-to people on my project that, when there's a tough question that's being asked, I can raise the hand if I have the answer because my background is cybersecurity. It is traditional security. It's not just single-threaded. It's multifaceted. And even if I don't, the great thing about the industry is typically you're part of an amazing team, and we all bring different strengths to the table. So it's all about, again, speaking to your strengths. What are you passionate about? What on this list of jobs in front of you speaks to you? But again, for today's webinar, we're going to be talking specifically to what it takes to become a cybersecurity auditor or a cybersecurity consultant. So jobs available typically after transitioning to cybersecurity come with a standard range of years of experience. And a lot of the details on the slide in front of you kind of speak to that, right? So 0 to 4 years of experience, right? Well, there's over 32,000 jobs on LinkedIn. If you have a profile and you set that up, and you open your profile up to recruiters, but there's also a tab where you can actually actively go out and you can look up cybersecurity consultant, or you can look up security consultant or cybersecurity auditor or security auditor. I challenge everybody that is dialing in today to do that, to see the amount of job opportunities that are out there, and then take it a step further. Are there any that, maybe, okay, if you fall into that 0 to 4 year range, are you meeting half of the requirements? Because if you are, I'm going to encourage you to tailor your resume to that job description and apply. What's the worst that happens? They say no. You still tried and you still get feedback. sometimes when you're getting into the industry, it is the feedback that makes us grow the most. It's that one tip a recruiter can give you that makes your resume get more hits than it did the first time. Um, but again, the more you go and the more you look and the more you apply and the more you engage, right? It's about engaging with the recruiters. It's about engaging with the, I wouldn't say job boards as a whole, but it's getting out there and getting a feel for what's out there. I'm not trying to say or convey like go out there and apply to every single job that says cybersecurity auditor. Do not do that. Probably you are probably cross posting and cross applying for the same job multiple times. That was an insider trading tip I was given when I transitioned out of the military, because that's actually a mistake that I was making. I didn't realize this. I was going to different varying job boards. So LinkedIn is an example, but I was going onto job boards like Monster, Indeed, LinkedIn, and I would see jobs that I thought I could fit. And oh my goodness, I have the experience to do this. So I would apply and I would drop my resume. Well, I think it was one job specifically. I had successfully applied for it 4 times over the course of 1 week. So I'm sharing that with you. Don't be that person. I just encourage you again, be selective, right? Go out there, read the job posts, find one that speaks to you and your resume, and you can say, okay, no fuss, I might have to put some work into this, but I can target my resume to this job. um, Reach out to me, engage with me on LinkedIn. I help with resume review. I help with resume targeting. I do not help with job placement, and I am not in HR, but I am an active mentor and I am an active mentee. So that's what it's about for me. And that's a big reason why I'm sharing my insider knowledge on these two jobs with you today, because I don't want to hoard the knowledge. I want to share it. And I want to see our industry grow and be successful, especially in roles like these. So after you find a job that really, speaks to you, okay. So what do some of those jobs in that first 0 to 4 years of work experience look like? Well, some of those jobs can include network security engineers, SOC security analysts, lots of analysts on here. Um, but what I would suggest is if you are in the 0 to 4 year range of experience, find something that the natural next step is your targeted job goals. So our job goals today are cybersecurity auditor or cybersecurity consultant. So it never hurts to start with a role like junior cybersecurity consultant, right? It doesn't hurt to get into InfoSec security administrator. That's one that can transition into a consultant role as well. Cybersecurity analysts, I do encourage, because again, you're in the industry, you're at the ground floor, you're learning a lot and you're learning it and absorbing it very fast, because this is a very fast-paced industry and the threat footprint is changing daily. So the whole point and purpose of this slide, right, is saying, okay, I know I have 0 to 4 years experience, but I know in 2 to 3 years, I want to be a cybersecurity auditor. I want to be a cybersecurity consultant, and this job can help me get there. Okay, so just a little backstory about myself. My first job when I got out of the military was a technical writer. I was a cybersecurity technical writer. I am now a security manager. That was a 3-year journey. So I started with cybersecurity writing. Why? Because I wanted to learn, because I wanted to be at the ground floor, right, and learning and absorbing everything I could on how to get to being a security manager, cybersecurity manager, right? That was my journey. But what I learned was my next role after being that technical writer was being a cybersecurity auditor. I didn't realize that by writing the policies that drive why we're secure gave me the ability to speak to whether we were actually doing it or not. And I realized rather quickly I loved it. And once I realized my passion was in it, I didn't stop. And so for the next year, I was not only a cybersecurity lead, but I was their lead auditor on a very, very small team, right? So that's what I'm trying to convey here. Use something that's on this list in front of you, right? And use it to grow and use it as a stepping stone to get to your next move, to get to your next position. Because the more you do and the more you experience and the more you immerse yourself into everything that is information systems and cybersecurity, the closer you're going to get to that goal of being just a well-rounded go-to cybersecurity consultant, right? Or the go-to cybersecurity auditor on a team running an audit or supporting an audit or an internal audit, right? So, and those right there, those types of skills are what is going to set you apart from other people in the industry right now, because everybody has a different approach, but that is what's made me the most successful. So again, just taking a little bit of time to share that with you. Our next slide we're going to dive right into is going to be kind of where, the root of our conversation is. So, and that's that, time span of your 48 years of work experience. Now, I'm not going to be the person that says that the work experience range is arbitrary and sometimes it's too stringent, right? It's a range for a reason. It's a suggestion benchmark for recruiters. So just another insider tip that I want to share with you today. A lot of the recruiters that we're talking to when we're applying for jobs, they're not in our industry. So it's about helping you tailor your resume to say, okay, look, I understand I've only been in the industry for however much time, right? But instead of saying 48 years, 0 to 4 years, I encourage everyone that is dialed in today to capture that in your project work, in your experience bullets for the jobs that you've done. If you don't have the experience to put, right, because your experience and what you've done can offset that timeline, I would like to venture and say, get out in your community, see what you can do to get that experience. So not to get, slightly off topic, but a big way I got that experience was immersing myself in the cybersecurity nonprofit communities that are around me. Um, and learning as much as I could. And that was getting me in the room with cybersecurity auditors. That was getting me in the room with very well paid and sought after cybersecurity consultants and having those conversations, 30 minutes, hours at a time. Okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to be doing? How can I help? What volunteer work can I get by? What type of project should I raise my hand for at work? What type of, are there ways I could stand up programs in my current job? Or is there a policy I could write, right? And asking those types of questions so that, over a certain period of time, 6 months or a year, I then had that experience to put on my resume so that, again, it's not, my resume is no longer speaking to, okay, I only have 2 years experience in the industry. It's speaking to, look at all of my actual job work portfolio bullets. And then you don't even have to have the conversation. They almost automatically, they know that you know what you're talking about, right? And you're showing it. And then once your resume gets you the interview, it's in the interview that you really get to hone in and highlight why you're so good at cybersecurity consulting, like, or why you're really, really good and passionate about cybersecurity auditing, right? You can start having conversations about things like your favorite type of security framework and why, and how it ties into other security frameworks, right? That's how I ended up on an auditing team. um, was my ability to say, okay, my favorite framework is NIST 800-53, right? Didn't matter the revision, but the fact that I even knew that that's a framework was pretty impressive, right? And that's something that they would expect somebody going into a role like that. Um, But then saying, okay, that's just one framework, but it ties into federal frameworks. It ties into, you know, other larger, I guess, attack methodologies is what I'm trying to get at. And then you can develop that conversation. And because it's the interview that actually gets you the job, right? It's not your resume. It's the conversation that the employer is taking the time to have with you because they want to gauge several things during that interview. They want to gauge your knowledge, right? They want to gauge your technical ability. They want to gauge your critical thinking. They want to see how you answer questions and they want to get to know you, right? So I know that's pretty broad, but the typical interview is about an hour long. And odds are for a job like a cybersecurity consultant or a cybersecurity auditor, you're going to have several interviews, believe it or not. You're not just, it's not going to be a one and done type interview process. I think on average for a role like that, the most interviews I've ever had to go through was 4. The least I've ever had to go through was 2, and that was to be a cybersecurity consultant lead for a law firm. So just a little bit, again, just insider trading tips. So just mentally prepare and ensure that, again, your resume really just highlights your strengths and what you're trying to target and move towards. And again, if you're not there right now, there's not a problem with that. It's just figuring out how to get there and what that roadmap looks like. Career roadmaps are the make or break in the industry right now. I have found across the board that a lot of my mentees don't necessarily know what that means. And so when I say career roadmap, I mean, okay, what is your 6-month plan? What is your 1-year plan? What are your goals in between? And it doesn't have to be rigid, it can be flexible. You don't have to set dates, but they're goals. And when you tackle a goal and you tie it to your resume and you tie it to a job that you're passionate about, you would be really surprised how much you are going to impress and just be in awe of yourself and what you're capable of. So let's take a little bit of a deep dive into, the types of, I guess, work experience that they're looking for, right? A lot of conversations in the in the industry and the job place everywhere right now are around, well, what are the recruiters looking for, right? What do they want? And I think the more important question on a slide like this is, what on here can I do? What on here can I speak to in an interview? What on here can I capture in 2 to 3 sentences on my resume that is going to set me apart from everybody else that is submitting for this job, right? So that is where I would start. So very similar to the way on your screen right now, I have about 7 of these highlighted just to share with you where I started. What I have highlighted on this slide were my strengths when I had 0 years work experience in the cybersecurity industry and I was trying to break in, right? Where did I get my start? I got my start with knowing that I could write an SOP, a standard operating procedure for a basic network. I had that capability and skill and I could write 2 to 3 sentences about how I did that very thing. And I'm not saying that's going to be your journey, but I'm just encouraging you to find possibly something on this list to work towards that you could write 2 to 3 sentences about. And then capture it and then have somebody proofread it and have somebody look it over until it really speaks the way you want to and it really, kind of gives you a voice before getting into that interview room, whether it's virtual or in person, right? So that's the takeaway here is, what are you good at and how can you speak to it? And if you don't, that's okay too. I didn't learn how to supervise the installation of new software and hardware because I was actually doing it. I learned how to do it and I gained the experience because I leaned on somebody in my internal network and they were like, hey, you should probably start working on this at work. So tying back, from a couple of slides ago, I was like, okay. And I started doing that. And I didn't do it for a week. I didn't do it for a month. I did it for a year. I did it until I could write a strong work bullet about it for my resume for my next job, right? Because I did end up supervising the installation of the software, but I had to speak to who vets it. Was it secure? How did I make it secure? How did I ensure that it was installed properly, right? And be able to have a conversation like that about it. So it's not just saying, okay, I know how to supervise the installation of this. No. We need to be able to speak to the security side of that conversation, right? So because that's the big difference here for cybersecurity consultants and auditors. It's that broader, okay, now tell me how it's secure and tell me about the policy that drives that installation, or why that specific hardware is not allowed on your network, or if you want this piece of software, who the approving authority is for it to be there. Is it the CISO? If you're from a DoD background in any capacity, is it, your authorizing official? Is it your mission owner? Is it your compliance officer on the corporate side? Is it your, who is it, right? And being able to explain it to a person like them in a way that will get you that job and would give them the trust that the risk is low and that their network is still secure and that you did a good job, right? That's the goal. So for some of these, like, I don't know how to maintain a server or a switch. So for me, I didn't highlight that. But I think that's a great example. If you know how to do that and you can speak to not only how you can maintain it, and keep it current and keep it secure and ensure that it's not going to get attacked by bad guys, you want to be able to speak to that on your resume. And that's what I challenge all of you to do, is to take this list and say, okay, what am I good at right now? And it's okay if it's none of these things. That's perfectly fine. You have to start somewhere, but then change the conversation to, what do I want to work on? What on this list makes me go, ooh, that could be fun, or I find that interesting. You're going to use the same approach, if you're looking at job descriptions for 48 years of work experience, right? So everything I just went over for the 0 to 4 years, well, guess what? It doesn't change. The conversation doesn't change. Why? Because it works. It's repeatable, right? So again, you have a list of expectations. Nia is not good at every single thing on this list, right? But when I got my first cybersecurity auditing role, right, I was able to speak to that first bullet, right? Computer incident detection and response activities. How was I able to speak to that? Because I had spent the last 2 years writing incident and event management response policies, right? So I took something that a lot of people didn't around me did not want to do and they didn't want to engage with. And I said, you know what? Okay, I enjoy writing. Let me try this. And at the end of it, though, I was able to speak to, if we had an attack or if we were threat modeling a project, right, what we would look for from an auditor's perspective, what questions we would ask, what security controls those tied to, right? What does a non-compliant result look like or impact your risk percentage versus a partially compliant or partially implemented result, right? The weighted scores are very different. Um, and I used a lot of really good, again, so right there, just pulling from my first job, technical writing skills. Use the heck out of that, right? Like I shared with you, my first job, but I used that as soon as I was applying for a cybersecurity auditing role, right? And that's how I sold myself in that interview, was speaking to, I can write a policy for every single security control family, and there are 19. And I know that there are on average over 1,000 security controls, and that breaks out into the control families, right? And have that conversation and talk to them how you tailor each individual one to the project that you're on, and then turn it into a conversation of building trust, right? From the document level all the way up through the implementation level, right? So your conversations are maturing at this point, but you've already done the hard work by the time you're able to highlight something green that's on the slide in front of you, right? So again, though, Nia did not go on the slide and say, ooh, okay, so I have really good background knowledge in advanced snort capabilities, because I do not. The last thing you want to do on a resume is embellish, right? A lot of, because again, when you're at this level, it's not just one interview. You are talking to either a panel on an interview call, and it can be, your first one might be, an HR rep. Your second one might be a panel. Your third one might be the actual person, the team lead or the manager of the team you're going to be on, right? So, and through all of this, they're going to weed out if you embellished a statement or not, okay? And I'm not saying that to intimidate you. I'm saying that to encourage you to find a mentor that can help you not over embellish, but also not be too humble, because that can make or break your ability to get an interview or break into a role like this as well, is being too humble and downplaying your accomplishments. I struggled with that. I don't struggle with it nearly as bad anymore, but that's because I have great mentors. I have great people I can lean on to review my resume before I submit it for another job or a promotion, or, insert whatever comes after the or. It doesn't necessarily matter. It's not just me, right? So I build a network. I have a lot of great peers and coworkers and team members, but in there are mentors and there are advocates. And I want to take a second to explain the difference, because they're not the same. A mentor is somebody you look at and you're like, oh my goodness, one day when I grow up, I want to be like that. Help me be like that. I want to be a CISO when I grow up. What do I have to do? What do those steps look like? Or, right, in this case, for this webinar, I want to be a cybersecurity auditor. I would challenge all of you to try and find somebody on your LinkedIn network that is in that role. And if they're not in your network, you could do the really scary thing and reach out, and you could say, you know what? Hey, I came across your profile. I'm really, really interested in this job role. Would you mind being my mentor? And believe it or not, no lie, 3 years ago, that's exactly what I did. I knew I wanted to get into the industry. I knew I wanted to be a cybersecurity manager. I didn't know exactly how I was going to get there, but I did. I went onto LinkedIn. I found somebody that had all of the descriptions next to their name that I wanted. And I reached out to a complete stranger and I said, hey, I'm Nia. I'm new to the industry, but I love your profile. I love what you do. I love that it speaks to your passion. Will you be my mentor? Do you mentor? Ask the brave question. Odds are people are going to say yes, and they are going to surprise you. But I would challenge, if you want to really get into cybersecurity consulting, do the same thing, same exact thing. Cybersecurity consulting is huge right now. I can't even express how large it is, because it's crucial. It is business impacting. Cybersecurity costs companies money. So you want to be able to find a mentor that can teach you how to get to where they are. Now, an advocate is somebody that can say, look, I've been working with Nia for 3 years. When I met her, she was a technical writer and she was dang good at it. But over the last year, she has done, and then they could start citing bullets like what you see in front of you on this slide, and they can tell a story about you on your behalf. That's an advocate, right? So very large difference. Sometimes they could be one in the same, but odds are they're not. Um, but they could be. So I would just there's the differences, right? An advocate is somebody like me who I have somebody on my team and we if we have a position, that's a little difficult to sell, but I see potential in somebody, I will have that conversation with my management team and I will advocate. But that does not necessarily mean that team member knows I'm advocating for them. Now, if they get the promotion, they know I did. But that's very different than mentorship. Mentorship is an ongoing, like basic business friendship. It can be, but it's more than just acquaintances or somebody that you see in a meeting room, right? You want to build a rapport with them. You want it to be symbiotic. You want it to be a give and take. It shouldn't just be a one way. Your mentor shouldn't always be giving 100% and you're not, and vice versa, right? You shouldn't be working your tail off and your mentor or the person that is saying that they're mentoring you not really give you the attention or, answering the questions and letting you kind of just hang out there and wonder. So I would highly, highly, highly encourage that. Just because and it could be me, it doesn't have to be me, but it's a big part of how I got to where I am, right? It's a big part of how when I was just writing policy and I got burnt out because that's a very real term in the industry right now too, is burnout. And I was ready for my next big step. Somebody advocated for me. And my next role, and they saw the strength in me before I did, was to be, to lead up their internal cybersecurity auditing team. So just a little food for thought. So I know I've already really talked about it, so we don't have to land on here, but just a little bit of background, right? So 13 years military service, um, but I leveraged all of my management skills, all of my help desk management skills, and I started working towards my first industry certification. So that's a really good place that I encourage every single one of you to seek out, right? So to be a cybersecurity consultant, what types of, certifications should you have, right? I'm not going to get into specifics because for every role and every company you work for, that criteria could be different. And I don't want to give you a false misrepresentation of that. But it's the same for a cybersecurity auditor. It depends on your employer. It depends on the role. It depends on the job board and who's posting, right? So, but that's where if you scroll and you see a post for a cybersecurity junior or senior like consultant role and it says, hey, certifications preferred or certifications required, those should give you a solid baseline of what to work towards, right? So there's multiple industry standards out there, but that's where I would encourage you to look and I would encourage you to start and I would sooner than later. It's never too late to start working towards your first or your fifth cybersecurity like certification, but just ensure that it's working towards that goal of the job that you're trying to achieve, right? So just make it make sense. The last thing I would want to see any of you do is earn a certification that you can't use. Um, yeah, I feel like that would probably I don't think that would be good. So just again, like, and if you can't answer that question, again, build that network, have that conversation. What should I work towards? What in the industry could really get me or thrust me ahead as I try and work towards becoming an auditor or a consultant, right? Those types of conversations. For me, I actually went to night school. You guys don't have to do that. If you already have your degree, you're better than me. Still in school, but continuous education. So a mentor of mine when I first started stated it like this: if you're done growing and you're ready to retire, then okay, maybe learning you don't have to. I wouldn't say shouldn't, but you don't have to continue your education. but if you want to stay relevant and you want to stay current and you're still growing and you're still reaching for your next role or your next job and you're not ready to retire, continuously push yourself, continue to learn. The industry changes at such a pace that on average in 2 years, if you haven't started working towards another certification or been studying in your own time and growing and learning things in the industry, you're stagnant. And the odds of getting promoted or actually being successful in, getting a new job in the role that you want become less and less likely. So 2 years, that's what's always been ingrained in me. It's not saying if you hold a role for 2 years, you're stagnant. That's not what I'm trying to communicate here. What I'm trying to communicate here is if you're still growing and you're still reaching and especially if you're breaking into the industry, study, learn, grow. It can be a podcast, it can be a webinar like this, it can be a technical talk, it can be YouTube, whatever speaks to how you learn, engage with that and grow. Okay. And then, one day you'll have a bunch of certifications or coursework to put on your resume to help really draw in a recruiter's eye when you're applying for jobs. So for me, a big part of it was tying all of that into specific areas, right, that I knew were relevant. And why this slide is very important is for anybody that's trying to get into the cybersecurity auditing world. These are all very, very, very relevant terms. So more specific at the top, though, that's a little more U.S. public sector speak or Department of Defense, right? That is my background, so that's why it's on there because that's where I got my start, right? So, but I took the guesswork out of it, and I, spelled out all of the acronyms. So the most important ones out of those first four bullets are the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, and FedRAMP, the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, FedRAMP. The reason why is because the NIST and FedRAMP lock in together and they list out the security control families, the subcontrols, and the control enhancements. And all of those terms, if cybersecurity auditing is the path for you and what you're passionate about, that's what's going to get you there, is studying the NIST framework, studying the SAF framework for FedRAMP, which is the security assessment framework, which is a little bit different. So different names, same controls is the point, right? So we don't like a lot of variation in the requirements when it comes to security, and we like it to be able to intertwine well with other things that are in the industry. A great example of this is that last bullet, the MITRE ATT&CK framework, right, which is a little bit newer. It replaced the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain methodology in the industry. They're both still current, but I feel like there is a sway a little bit to the last one, a little more so in the last 6 months. So, but what's great about it is NIST security controls tie directly into the attack methodologies. And what that allows you to do is be able to target when you're auditing if something is set up for an incident alert, an event alert, or anything like that, right? So, and again, just highlighting just the ability and the fluidity in both of the roles, if you're able to have that conversation or be able to explain it the way I just did, maybe cybersecurity consulting is good for you as well. If you have an eye for knowing that there are over 250 cybersecurity frameworks out there, right? But which one should apply to a project and why? Cybersecurity consulting is probably a really good role for you to look into. And if you can get passionate about it and show that you care about it and you really know your stuff and develop that trust in an interview or with an employer, even better. So the most important, I guess, part of my journey, right, to close this up with everybody that dialed in today is this big driving point is to pay it forward. So a lot of people ask me why, even with a crazy demanding job in the industry actively. Um, why I do webinars like this, it's to pay it forward to all of you. Every single one of you that before today's conversation had no idea how to break into either of these job roles. You had no idea where to start, no idea where to look, no idea what questions to ask yourself, never mind a complete stranger or even one of your friends that is in the industry, right? Well, hopefully I did do that today. Hopefully I did share, by sharing part of my journey with you, I gave you a way to get started and take that first step towards one of those roles. Your choice. That's the glory in it. And if you get to experience other cybersecurity roles in between, even better, right? Because to me, it's about learning as much as I can and then getting on here and being able to share it with all of you and being able to give you tips on how to be successful and not jump on every job board and cross post apply with the same resume to the same job 4 times in 1 week. You know, but just being able just to have this opportunity to connect during a crazy chaotic time and help anybody be successful is what it's about for me. I found amazing mentors and mentees along the way. And during that time, I was able to establish 2 not-for-profit, you know, organizations here. And yes, I know by here, I'm in the United States. I'm not sure where everybody else is at, but we're international nonprofits, right? So that's the glory in all of it as well, is in today's virtual community, it's endless, right? The connection points are endless. And how can we help everybody else around there be just as successful as we are? Is what, I challenge everybody on this call to think about and on, just even if it's for a second. Because I know when I started thinking that way, it really changed my perspective of how I wanted to be a part of the industry and how I wanted to affect change. And this is how I do that, right? So I love to speak often and share my story through all of these experiences. If you liked what I had to say today, I challenge all of you to go onto LinkedIn and look me up and just connect. I don't have to be your mentor. You don't have to be my mentee. We can just connect and be a part of each other's network. You can follow me. Um, I really, I'm a hands-off approach unless you ask me directly. But that's all I have.